There were great celebrations and huzzahs aplenty over at Activision Blizzard when the company was purchased by Microsoft. Many of the programmers there, many of the developers thought, boy, oh boy, oh boy, Bobby Kotick is gone and now Microsoft is in. They'll love us, they'll treat us right. Oh wait, we're fired. Yeah, Microsoft, in a not-so-surprising move, laid off plenty of the people who make the games that you once loved, or, well, maybe some of the people who could no longer make the games that you once loved. We'll explain the full-on tragic story of Blizzard, what happened with Microsoft, and why it may be a predecessor for what we're watching with the Walt Disney Company. Hello, folks. Welcome back to another BEA Beautiful Day here on the Pro Channel. Happy to have everybody here. We're talking to you. Yes, you! Glad to have you. And today we're talking about Blizzard. We're talking about the once great video game company, the creator that made some of the greatest games of all times, classics that were genre-defining kinds of games. And sadly, they don't do that so much anymore. They have blips of success. They have some big games. But oftentimes, well, they're short-lived and there's disappointments to be found after the initial download. Today we're talking about what has happened to that studio when it comes to their purchase that has happened where they have been bought out by Microsoft, and it is a tale that is all too familiar. Anyone remember Rare? Yeah. Well, let's get into it with a panel that knows what they're talking about, and I think you are going to come away much smarter because you stuck around for the video today. This is the story about Blizzard Entertainment, and I have said often that I thought Activision Blizzard was very much like the predecessor in terms of downfall, that Disney was now on that same path. So here's the article. It's out of PC Gamer. Activision's Call of Duty general manager takes over as president of Blizzard. This by Andy Chalk. Joanna Ferries will take the reins at Blizzard next week following the surprise departure of Mike Ybarra and Microsoft's mass layoffs of the company. And Microsoft has a pattern of buying companies and then utterly destroying them. It's really fascinating. I would also say that there's a man named Adham, who I can't remember his first name right now. It'll come back to me in a minute. But he was one of the co-founders, one of the three co-founders of Blizzard Entertainment. He was back at the company. It seemed like he was actually making strides to fix the company finally. And in face of Bobby Kotick having just really damaged Blizzard, he's gone now too. And so I fear that this is just flat out over for Blizzard. Here's the article. Blizzard Entertainment has announced that its new president is Joanna Ferries, who previously spent nearly 3 years as the general manager of Activision's Call of Duty franchise. Ferries will replace Mike Ybarra, who unexpectedly announced his departure when Microsoft laid off 1,900 employees from its gaming division last week. In an email sent to Blizzard employees, Ferries said, Activision, Blizzard, and King are decidedly different companies with distinct cultures, games, and communities, and that she's taking on the position with sensitivity to those dynamics and deep respect for Blizzard. I'm committed to doing everything I can to help Blizzard thrive with care and consideration for you and for our games, each unique and special in their own right. Of course, this comes also on the heels of 1,900 terminations. It really, we'll close that out before we get hit with something, but it really draws into consideration, the contrast of Blizzard employees being so excited that they were being bought out by Microsoft. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. And this is something actually that had been fended off in the past. So if you go and you read Mark Kern, his take on this, he said that years and years ago, Microsoft attempted to buy out Blizzard and they successfully blocked it. And now the employees have become so naive that they were all excited that Microsoft was going to buy them. And as soon as they bought them, they fired them all.
I'm just going to point out that it's obviously on the record that they considered doing a hostile takeover of Nintendo at some point, but decided that the damage to the brand that they would inflict by doing it was going to outweigh the purchase price or something like that. So I don't trust Microsoft at all. Oh yeah, that leaked out a while ago.
It's weird. I really like the Xbox. I really like the Xbox One X. I think it's probably technically the best next gen console. That's not to say that I dislike PlayStation, but it is to say that from a technical standpoint, and I think that's probably because of the frame rate you can achieve in 4K if you have an OLED screen.
But just from the ridiculousness of the way they're naming convention, do you mean an Xbox One Series X or do you mean an Xbox Series X?
Exactly. So that's the other issues. They're terrible at everything else. They're great at producing console technology. They're really good at internet stability. they're really, really terrible at managing the studios they buy. They destroy them. They absolutely destroy every studio they grab. And they're also really, really bad at managing their games. I mean, you look at Nintendo and what they do, and then you look at Microsoft, and it's like, Microsoft, they buy these companies with the desire to increase their portfolio of unique games for their platform. And then they gut the studio and they create such a terrible environment for creativity. Look what they did to Rare. Rare was one of the best
Yes.
studios on the planet. They
Sweet
destroyed
Mother
it.
God, yes.
Yeah.
Like they took literally Rare has games that are still talked about 20, 30 years later to where they are absolutely irrelevant to anything going on with kids today. And they got that IP and they should have had what's the closest thing to a Nintendo killer on their side. And but outside, when was the last time they did something relevant with Rare? Connect Sports, or dare I say Banjo Kazooie Nuts and Bolts in 2008?
Ooh.
And that game wasn't even
The last thing that Rare
popular.
did that was significant was
Grabbed by
Viva
the ghoulies.
Pinata.
Oh, Viva Pinata.
No, I'm sorry. The pirate. The pirate game
That's
was
what I was
okay.
about to say. I can't even remember the name of it. That's how do you get Rare and drop the ball? And
it's almost like
something
having a high level executive like Shigeru Miyamoto tell you how to make games and guide you is more important than the studio itself at times.
Well, let's think about that.
I'm getting reminded of Bob Iger with Lassner. Like I think this is the critical mistake that I think a lot of the CEOs in such of these companies make is they buy the brand and they think everything else is going to be good. The creator in Nintendo would be nothing if not for just made a great point here. Like Miyamoto, like I was watching a Did You Know Gaming did a fascinating piece on Shigeru Miyamoto lately, and it's fascinating seeing him raise from the rank, being in the right place at the right time. But what if he hadn't been there overseeing in new roles, like rooming up the next generation of people, the company could have completely faltered without his guidance. And of course, that's like different universe scenarios, obviously. But if more companies could just grasp the, hey, we have smart dude, don't fire smart dude, you would have several more $1 billion and have a lot less people hate you and your brand.
I think your argument's 100% right on and spot on, because I mean, Lasser is a perfect example. I mean, we could go through a list of them, but there's a certain combination of things that work, and the minute you stop using that combination, things don't work anymore. And you look at obviously Pixar as an example, as you guys have used, but this has happened in Disney's past for a long period of time. It's happened in a lot of companies' past, where they get rid of the secret sauce, and they wonder why it doesn't work anymore. All they had to do was not instill their culture in Marvel, not instill their culture in Pixar. I mean, look at Illumination. They're running wild at Universal under the same leadership, the same guiding hand. Do you know why?
Also, remind us what the ROI was on the Despicable Me franchise.
Oh, well, didn't we report on it? How many billions of dollars has it had?
$4.5 billion so far in intake.
On $300 million in investment.
That's an ROI.
That's ridiculous. I don't think they could have predicted it, and I think they're probably as staggered as we are when we talk about it. But at the same time,
why the Minions look the way they do, Culture?
Banana.
The Minions look the way they do because they didn't want to spend the budget on making human characters because it was going to take too much work. So they figured out that making little yellow blobs with big eyeballs was a very small expenditure on their animators and designers and all of that. And they could replicate them.
Yeah, well, they turned out to be genius because I love banana.
Exactly.
Use your disadvantages to your advantage. Like it appeals to kids. That's the thing I had a deep thought the other day when I was actually listening to one of the pro shows you were doing, which is one thing I really just do not understand with Disney and a lot of other companies, toys included, is I don't think they're thinking enough of the philosophy of how are we not just going to appeal to kids? How are we going to market to kids? Because are they thinking about, like, take like Disney, for example. You are going to market to kids with Disney only if you're on Disney Plus or if you're getting an ad on YouTube. It used to be, I remember when I was young, there'd be like so many different ads to where you'd have almost like a kid culture of like what every kid was doing, whether it'd be like every kid was playing Pokemon. Even if you weren't into something, you would have all like, say, the girl toy ads where it's like, oh yeah, I know what Polly Pocket is. There's like 20 million commercials for it when I'm watching Nickelodeon or something. I don't understand, like with a lot of these companies, it's like, why are they not more aggressive in trying to get into the zeitgeist of children, their culture, like what they're looking for? Because if something's relevant, they'll at least bat an eye to it, because kids are usually pretty stubborn on trying to give new things a chance. But if you can get into kind of like their mindset, you can land. But if you look at
house, if you look at Pixar, for instance, they've, in my opinion, and you guys can disagree with me on this, I think they've only done one brand that was specifically something that markets to kids, and that was Cars. And that was very much a boy brand, which of course they had to kind of kill that with the last movie. But you look at Toy Story; those were toys that appealed more to grown-ups looking back. But if you look at Cars, the amount of money they made on saying these are cars that have lives, and by the way, there's a whole bunch of them, and they race and they have sports, and they're just, that to me screams child brand more than anything else that Disney Animation has done for years.
I would say that it had broad appeal. I think it appealed to adults as well. I mean, some of the shops that you could go to in Radiator Springs were definitely oriented around the adults and the hot rod enthusiasts, et cetera, et cetera.
The video games were fantastic too.
Yeah,
you would actually explore Radiator Springs. Yeah, it was back when licensed games, they actually cared.
But as it often gets pointed out, Disney is supposed to be marketing to families, but instead of now marketing to families, they're marketing to adults with baggage.
Well, young adults. That's how you get the
not a lot of
character of anxiety being the bitch. And I like the actress who's playing the character. She's out of Stranger Things.
But to go to what Illumination is up to right now and what DreamWorks is up to, my kids watched Puss in Boots: The Last Wish all the way down to Orlando, Florida, and guess what? Guess who popped up when we went to Universal Studios, Florida? There is Kitty Softpaws and Puss in Boots. Oh, and by the way, Shrek's over there. You'll get to know him in a few years when they revive that franchise. But DreamWorks and Illumination, make no mistake, they have to market to kids. And again, going to that Epic Universe presentation, they are focused on appealing to the audience more than trying to tell the audience what they should want or trying to tell them a message about the world. They'll put a message in there. Okay, whatever. Despicable Me on some level is about family and trying to redeem yourself. But for the most part, it's about fart jokes and minion butts and making kids laugh.
So let's apply that back to Blizzard now. So going back to Blizzard, what did they do? Well, back in about 2007, this is my recollection as best I know it, folks, but some subjectivity here. They had this massive unexpected success with World of Warcraft, and yet the corporation that existed such back then said, well, we had already planned to fire everybody to reduce the size of the team, so we're still going to make you do that, and then we'll rehire whoever we want at a lower price because these people are going to get massive bonuses. The head of the team at that time, Mark Kern, said, no, I'll quit over it. And they said, fine, so be it. And so then, following their third expansion, the quality dropped significantly because they don't have the team any longer to develop the ideas that originally were so successful. You had the dissolution, essentially, of the relationship between Blizzard and Blizzard North, which allowed for the Diablo series, which was so successful. You had chasing far too much nickel and diming DLC strategies with Star Wars or StarCraft. And so you decimated out your franchises. You got lucky with Overwatch, and then you destroyed that with social justice posturing nonstop. And eventually you got to the point where you had run off all the geniuses and you'd created this hostile, toxic, femme fatale workforce at Blizzard, such as what we see at Disney already. Then Microsoft comes in and buys out Blizzard. And what happens then? Well, everybody gets fired, and now it's just another corporation where the IPs were the only value that was to be had, and the creatives have gone to create something new. And so I'm curious, guys, as we wrap up, is this just the life cycle? Is this just the way that things go, that you have moments of brilliance and then those are taken over by corporations and stomped out. Is that how we play the game nowadays?
Doesn't have to be if you don't sell out, and I don't mean that to say no
That is a good.
person should ever sell.
That's a great question, Nolan. Maybe, back to Musk. We brought up Elon Musk earlier in the show. There's a lot of companies, at SpaceX, for example, private. There's something to be said about this. It's not always wise if you're a creative riding high on making new things. Not always a great idea to go public when you can.
Yeah, no, the amount of brands I grew up with that I've just seen just completely destroyed. Not even just the Star Wars or like Marvel stuff like we tend to talk about often on the channel, but it's the same story every time. Like a lot of the times that they had this great creation that was in-house, so they had a lot of people who were passionate about it. It's like the difference between a corporate restaurant compared to like a mom and pop shop. Someone's there to get a paycheck. The other one, that's their business, so they want to treat you like royalty. And they cared about like the characters they made, but a lot of the times either they decided to sell off the franchise when it got big, or B, a lot of times they tried to bet the farm too much. They like tried to make a movie adaptation, and they put so much of their budget of the show into that to where the film flopped and they had to sell it off just, to keep themselves afloat. And you really need a culture, because if you go back to like say the 90s and 2000s, there was still a lot of brands that still were held into, like, say, George Lucas owned Star Wars back then, so they could be a lot more picky with like who they were bringing in to make these decisions. If you turn every place into a McDonald's, it can't keep longevity, because if you have a whole culture where nobody cares, no one's going to care about your product.
Well said.
Well said.
Culture, I'm going to give you the last word of the entire show. We've got 2 super chats, but you wrap this entire thing up with your incredible, prescient, I dare say, words of wisdom.
Banana.
I knew it. I knew he was going to do it. I knew it. And put it in the can. Folks, another video of excellence. Down and out, but counts for yet another perfect tally. All right, it is your turn now. Drop a like, share, subscribe, and click it. Stick it to the algorithms. We're talking about that notification bell. And comments are definitely appreciated. Drop one down below. Even though we have to say that just your view alone was already so grand. Thank you. Folks, wherever you are and whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun. After all, the world could use more heroes.